Hey everyone, so as most of you know, I have just completed the Arrancar arc, so I'm a good part of the way through Bleach now. Some of you were curious about my current theories I have at this juncture, so I thought I'd share some that I currently have, just for fun. I don't typically like to attach myself too much to theories, since I prefer to kind of get carried on the ride, but naturally some do come to mind, especially if you're experiencing the story over an extended period of time. But just note that I'm not super locked in with any of these. But here are a few of the theories that have crossed my mind, or I've given some actual serious thought to, about Bleach. Where I'm at, currently at the end of the Arrancar arc. This is coming from the perspective of a first-time reader, and yeah, we'll see how we do. Obviously, I don't want to know if I'm right or wrong, so this isn't me asking for the real answers. Obviously, a lot of you have finished the series. You know whether these are right or wrong, but I don't want to know. I don't want to know if I'm correct on anything specific. This will essentially just be me rambling incoherently about things that most of you probably already know the real answers to. So this could be utterly ridiculous for you. Brace yourselves. Theory 1. Nemu was created from Quincy experimentation. Okay. So even though I haven't seen all that much of her so far, a lieutenant who really interests me is Nemu, mainly because of what little I know about her or what she really is. I know that she was created by Mayuri in some kind of experiment, an artificial being that is a Soul Reaper lieutenant, and I feel like this hasn't been shown to be as big of a deal as it seems to me. He created a being that is a Soul Reaper, that is a Lieutenant Soul Reaper in the Soul Society. Yeah. Why aren't we screaming this to the rooftops? This is crazy, but maybe because she isn't exactly a Soul Reaper. She hasn't gotten that much time to shine or anything, but I think Kubo's holding out for a big moment for her, and like I said, I think it has to do with her being made from the Quincy. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, Mayuri experimented and dissected tons of Quincy's after the Soul Reapers nearly drove them to extinction. I mean, he could have done this just out of his own curiosity or his obvious sadism, but what if all of those horrible experiments were actually used for some specific scientific purpose? Subjects that would be used for a singular experiment. Hell, maybe Soul Society didn't even know about it. But it could be that Mayuri, all of his research and all of his cutting Quincy's apart and dissecting them, and it could have all been that he was taking the best, most powerful parts of Quincy and grafting them into his own creation. A masterwork. Something that is new and never been done before. A living being that he considers a daughter, even though he treats her terribly and is abusive. Yeah, maybe he used the Quincy research to pool into one being. Do I have any real basis for this? Nothing concrete, just I feel like Mayuri's research into Quincy's could have more of a narrative impact than it has so far. It might be for something very specific. And while it might be nothing, there's a slight connection we've seen between Nemu and Uryu, at least Uryu pitying the things that she's put through, and that could be part of it too. Because maybe part of Mayuri's abuse and how he treats Nemu stems from her being mostly made up of Quincy, and Mayuri still views her that way. She's just this weird experiment that's made up of all these pieces of creatures that he's already mutilated. And I also think this could just add to the horror done by Mayuri to Uryu's people, because it's not bad enough that he tortured, killed, and dissected the Quincy, but now he used their remains to create something that was beholden to him and treated so terribly under his thumb. It would just make it even worse. But there also could be something potentially there narratively about Nemu fighting back against her abuser and reclaiming the Quincy in a way. I don't know, maybe we've got Uryu and his dad as the last remaining Quincy, but maybe Nemu in a way is also carrying that flame, even if she doesn't realize it. I feel like this is just coming from how much I liked the Uryu versus Mayuri fight and would love to see it be built upon more. Hell, Uryu's pity for Nemu during that fight could be turned into something deeper than that. The two of them could be some of the last Quincy together and could offer a chance to learn more about the nearly dead culture. Like, I would love to learn more about the Quincy. We don't really know specifics, and maybe this could be a way into that, to learn more about that backstory. And I haven't seen Nemu wield a Zanpakuto, right? Maybe she just hasn't used hers yet, or maybe she's actually more of a Quincy than a Soul Reaper. Maybe she's not a Soul Reaper at all. Maybe she doesn't have a Zanpakuto. I think it could be an incredible reveal at some point if Nemu is in a fight, and suddenly she creates an arrow and fires it. Like, come on. That would be awesome. I'm just saying, there could be something really interesting there if I'm right. But, like with all of these theories, I'm fully prepared for nothing I say actually coming to pass. So, yeah, that's my Nemu theory. She's a Quincy Frankenstein. Theory 2. Shunsui's Bankai is essentially Mario Party. I know this sounds stupid. I just heard my voice say it out loud. It's stupid, I know, but maybe, just maybe, it's correct. I've been very curious about Shunsui's Bankai since it was first brought up. Unlike some other Soul Reapers, we specifically know that he does indeed have one, but he didn't use it during the battle. Instead, he only used his Shikai against Stark and Aizen, which, by the way, super impressive to beat the #1 Espada with a Shikai, and that alone might be saying something about how powerful his Bankai potentially is. The interesting part for me was why he didn't use it. Ukitake urged him not to, because of how many other people were around or that might see it. The way I read it was that Shunsui's Bankai would actually harm others around them besides the intended target. So to me, it sounds like it has a very wide area of attack that would affect most people in his surroundings, and maybe even further. For them to be worried enough about that to not use it at all is a testament to how damaging it might be. This man chose to get stomped alongside his allies rather than attempt to use his Bankai against Aizen. He chose defeat, pain, and the potential death of himself and his fellow Soul Reapers over using his Bankai. That's crazy. When I first learned what his Shikai was, bending reality to force him and his opponent to play by the rules of children's games, I compared it to Jumanji a little bit with how a game is coming to affect the real world. And when it comes to Bankai, they seem to be more powerful versions of what's already there, enhancing a Shikai either literally or thematically. There's usually a connection between the two, like Renji's segmented snake blade turns into a giant segmented snake. So I'm going to assume his Bankai has some kind of connection to what we've seen of his Shikai, in this case, a much more extreme version of it. So I think Shunsui's Bankai turns everything surrounding him within a specific range into some kind of board game maybe, where everyone can only move in specific ways and land on specific special effects that change what happens to them. And I think this game is life or death, which makes it so dangerous. If you lose, you die, and that's why they have to be careful using it around people, because he could inadvertently pull all of these people into the game, and the more people that play, the less likely they are to win, so the more likely they are to die. That's what I imagine. Something like that, where your life hinges on the roll of a dice and how well you play the game. It's like that really weird couple episodes of Dragon Ball GT, and I know that's not very specific because there's a lot of weird episodes of Dragon Ball GT, but if you've seen it, you probably know what I mean. It makes sense in my head. I don't know if it makes sense to anyone else. Maybe that's a little too literal or too on the nose, but I think it's a natural evolution to his whole fun and games thing, especially if the game's stakes and potential deadliness is raised so high, where he himself is not even certain that he would win. Shunsui strikes me as a bit of a gambling man, but not one that's willing to throw away the lives of all of his comrades nearby. Yeah, that's my theory on Shunsui's Bankai. This could be really stupid, I know, but I hope I'm right. We'll see. My next theory, I assume, will be answered in the very near future. So theory 3, Ichigo will use tools to help continue to fight. So where I'm at now, Ichigo has lost not only his Soul Reaper powers, but also his ability to even see the paranormal, but I don't think he's gonna just be completely out of the fight. I think he'll try to move forward like the end of the Arrancar arc implied, but a situation will arise where he'll want to be back in, and I think he'll turn to Urahara. We've known about Urahara's shop of all kinds of nifty paranormal tools for a long time, and I think this is when it might finally get a real spotlight. With him acting as like Q branch to Ichigo's 007, maybe even devising a way for Ichigo to be able to see spirits again at least. It won't make him as powerful as when he was a Soul Reaper, obviously, but it might tide him over until he eventually gets his powers back, because I've no doubt that he will at some point. I just kind of like the idea of Ichigo fighting a hollow with like a utility belt full of Urahara gadgets. You know that scene from Iron Man 3 when Tony doesn't have his suit, so has all these makeshift weapons? That's kind of what I think will happen, showing Ichigo's resolve despite completely new circumstances. I joked about Ichigo being a Ghostbuster last video, and I think that might not be far off, having to rely on tech for a bit. Then again, he could just find some other more spiritual way to reconnect with his abilities, but I'd love to maybe do both if possible. I think that'd be fun. Hell, have him consult with Don Kanonji and have Don Kanonji actually give him some useful advice. Yeah, that's where I think it could go potentially. Hopefully I'll find out soon. This one seems like it'll be revealed sooner than some of these other ones, obviously, based on the way the story's going. Now, I have two theories rolling around about Isshin's past, since my brain has been spinning about him being a Soul Reaper for like a while now. It's the backstory I want to know most, and since Kubo has very cruelly kept it out of my reach, I've had to conduct some ideas of my own, so bear with me, because here comes the first of my Isshin theories. Isshin was the previous Kenpachi. Yep. Here's where my head is at with this possibility. Isshin faked his death by being killed by the Kenpachi we know and love. When I say it out loud, I feel like I sound crazy, but I'm actually kinda serious about this. In Turn Back the Pendulum, we learned that the captains of Squad 11 have always been called Kenpachi, and we know that our Kenny, Kenpachi Zaraki, killed the former captain in front of 200 witnesses to take their place. If you really want people to believe you're dead so you can run off to the living world and start a family, maybe you'd want it to be in front of as many eyes as possible. My boy Kenny Z wouldn't have been in on it because that isn't his style to fake kill anyone, but I could see Isshin doing that without anyone's knowledge, or maybe some help from Urahara, who wasn't a captain yet, but still smart, I'm sure. How funny would it be if he was a Kenpachi? His very direct and hostile ways of ambushing Ichigo to secretly train him would make even more sense. I also think it would be funny if unconsciously, part of Zaraki's desire to beat Ichigo is more than just the desire for a rematch, but also a thirst to, in some ways, finish a battle that Ichigo's father ended with trickery, one that was never actually resolved. I just think it would be an interesting route to explore and would be a nice twist for the Bleach universe, and would make for an interesting connection between Kenpachi Zaraki and Ichigo. But I have another theory on Isshin's potential backstory, so let's get into that. Isshin was a member of the Soul King's guards, Zero Squad. This is a second possibility I have in what Isshin's backstory could be, and I think this one is the more probable one of the two to me. This is just a personal thing of mine because I feel like there's reason to believe that Isshin was somewhat separate from the other Soul Reapers. There's a few reasons I'm thinking along these lines. For one thing, we never see him in any of the flashbacks to Soul Society's past, but we did learn in Turn Back the Pendulum's backstory that some Soul Reapers can be promoted to be part of the Soul King's guards. Maybe Isshin was one of those guards, which would explain why we never see him around, because he was in the Soul King's realm, which is very clearly a separate place from the Sarate and the rest of the Soul Society that we've seen. The only Soul Reapers who seem to be aware of Isshin's existence and his connection to Ichigo are Urahara and Yoriichi. And Aizen, obviously. It doesn't seem like many people are aware of his existence, and it seemed like Kubo went out of his way to make sure that Isshin showed up later in the fight when most of the other Soul Reapers are out of commission. He also has what looks like a part of a Soul Reaper captain robe tied to his shoulder instead of wearing it. That could just be part of his style, or maybe it's a Soul King guardsman thing that I don't know. Maybe that's how Squad Zero dresses. But we know very, very little about Zero Squad, besides that when Soul Reapers are promoted to join them, they leave the Serite and have to be replaced. I imagine guarding the Soul King is a very high pressure job, or that of course you probably become very close to the person you're guarding, at least in proximity. Given Aizen and Urahara's conversation, there's more to the monarch than it seems, and maybe Isshin saw something that most people wouldn't understand and left because of it, or he saw too much. And another thing that has me leaning in this direction is about 100 years ago, we see Aizen hear about Squad Zero, and we see him look legitimately alarmed and curious. I think that was genuinely him learning about it for the first time, and his interest is clearly piqued, and we know he eventually was trying to get into the realm where the Soul King and Squad Zero are, and according to Aizen, he's been aware of Ichigo since the moment he was born. So there's a backstory between Aizen and Isshin that we haven't seen. And maybe somewhere in the interval between Aizen learning about Squad Zero and Ichigo's birth, maybe Aizen was trying to find out more about Squad Zero and developed some kind of relationship with Isshin because of it. If Isshin was a Squad Zero member, Aizen could have learned more about the Okin and the Soul King and that realm from him. And maybe he became close enough with Isshin through that's what made him aware that Isshin ended up being on Earth and having a child with a human woman. Maybe there's a connection there, somewhere between Isshin, Squad Zero, and Aizen. Given everything we know and what we've seen of the Soul Society's past, which admittedly isn't a huge chunk of time or anything, this one feels the most right to me. Isshin being a member of Zero Squad could help further introduce us to the concept and that part of Bleach that so far has been pretty unexplored at this point. And this kind of connects a little with my final big theory that I have right now, which I think is kind of a natural one to have at this point in the story. The Soul King will be the final villain of Bleach. I've been giving this one a lot of thought, especially as to why Aizen would go through the trouble of influencing Ichigo and helping him grow, only for Ichigo really to have no real bearing on Aizen's plans in the Arrancar arc, outside of, stopping him. Ichigo wasn't needed for the creation of the Okin, and while Aizen seemed interested in his development, he wasn't actively trying to recruit him to the dark side either. I think maybe Aizen viewed Ichigo as a failsafe and a weapon for the future, something he might need, or maybe it was purely scientific curiosity, but one thing that was clear was Aizen's goal of reaching the Soul King. Aizen wanted to get into the Soul King's realm, to kill him, or maybe to expose what he really is to the rest of the Bleach world. We now know that it doesn't seem like most people have ever seen the Soul King, and when Aizen did, he referred to the king as a thing, and questioned how Urahara could take orders from it. Maybe we'll learn that what Aizen was doing, trying to kill the Soul King, was actually a good thing, and Ichigo was a potential weapon he was developing to be able to fight the Soul King. Maybe we'll find out that Aizen was a hero all along. Or at least a villain that had understandable intentions. The Soul King is mysterious and separate from us, which taps into a natural fear of the unknown, of something that sounds so far beyond what we've dealt with. We've seen the corruption and the injustice of the Bleach universe, so who's to say that the Soul King isn't just as capable of being corrupt? While personally I would prefer that the Soul King is a neutral force, like an unseen force in the Bleach universe, I feel like we're being set up for potentially the Soul King to take on more of an antagonistic presence. The threats keep on rising, and maybe eventually we'll get to a point where Ichigo has to face the ultimate being in the universe. Another thing, the slaughter and genocide of the Quincy isn't something that's discussed much. You see how I brought this video full circle with the Quincy? And from how it sounds, it doesn't sound like it was something that can really be justified. I don't think genocide in general can be justified, but we haven't been given much background as to what the Quincy did to be dealt with like that. We know that they were opposed with the Soul Reapers. Yeah, they might have been upsetting the balance or whatever, but I don't know. I don't think genocide was the answer. And the way it's kind of been brushed under the rug in the plot makes me think that we're gonna eventually learn that the Soul King wiping out the Quincy's was something really, really bad, and it'll be a reason for our heroes to have to fight against him. Essentially have to fight against the natural order of things, which we have been doing a little bit. The whole invasion of Soul Society was kind of sticking a middle finger at what's supposed to be the natural order. I think that might be where we're eventually going, is that the Soul King could be really bad, and maybe Zero Squad is going to be like the Espada, you know, like the people we're going to have to fight. So there you have it. Those were some of the theories I have about the series so far. I'm sure all of these will be proven correct. Even the Ishin theories, which literally can't both be true, I don't think. These are totally right, I'm sure. Hopefully this was at least fun to hear. We'll see how I did with these, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't like to get too attached to any theories, but yeah, some of these I think just feel like might be the right direction. We'll see. I'm sure you guys are laughing right now because I sound ridiculous. Anyway, I'll see you hopefully this weekend as we begin the next arc of Bleach. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, please become a member. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.